I'm Nathan Ponchard, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the first ever electric version of a core BMW, the 2022 iX3. The other thing that makes the iX3 a little bit different is that it is produced in a joint venture facility in Shenyang in China, owned by BMW and Brilliance Automotive. So this electric iX3 is made in its biggest market. Now in Australia, this car starts at $114,900 before on-road costs, but it does come here with a very well specified variant. What sets it apart, you might ask? Well, it's pretty obvious from front on that this is not a normal X3, even though it does look like the facelifted X3, which is exactly what it is. It has 10mm slimmer headlights than before, although I don't know how anyone can tell that. It also has these filled-in panels here and various other panels underneath, all of which open and close depending on how much cooling the battery needs. This car in particular, which is M Carbon Black, which looks black until you're in the sun, like here where I'm sweating, and it looks metallic navy blue, which is actually really cool. So it does match better with this no-cost option BMW iBlue, which I am disliking less the more I look at it. It's normally frozen grey, here it's this blue. The iX3 also has BMW LED adaptive headlights with the BMW laser light, a $2,000 option. This one doesn't have it, but they do look pretty cool. They definitely look better at nighttime, obviously because they're turned on, but also because there's a lot going on in the front here, and I think it does take a bit of time to get used to just how busy the iX3 is there. But I feel like a lot of the changes to this car do make it look pretty good for an X3. It's not an exciting car to look at, but this does add an element of glamour, including these M 20-inch alloy wheels here that have a lot of filled-in stuff on them. They're kind of probably done for aero, but they do look really good. Our iX3 does have a standard M Sport package, so hence the M badges on it, the side skirts, the venting, the general look of it. It does have a sportiness about it, which I really think kind of suits the car. One major benefit of having an iX3 is that having the batteries in the floor of the car means it has a 75mm lower center of gravity than a normal X3. And I think you'll discover when we drive this car, it actually does have a level of dynamism and a bit more dynamic character than a normal X3, which isn't really known for that, let's be honest. It's also a bit interesting that when you look at this iX3 with this M Sport pack, it kind of looks like how BMW would do a show car. It's like it has all the different lighting and the jazzy wheels and the blackout windows and the colouring. You can imagine this on a motor show stand to jazz up a stand when there's nothing new. And this certainly does jazz up an X3 to make it much more interesting, in my opinion at least. Let us know what you think in the comments below. And I particularly think that at the back, while these new overstyled taillights, I don't know whether they're overstyled, I actually think they're quite striking, are shared predominantly with the normal X3. I think they suit the iX3 better than the normal car. They look really cool, especially when they're lit up. It just gives it this sort of element of electric chic about it. It's got a blue eye badge here, and with the no-cost option iBlue, we have these blue fills down the bottom here. And because we have the M Sport pack, we have a bit of faux venting here and just a general stance at the back of the iX3 that makes it look a bit more muscular than the car that it's based upon. And in here, we have 510 litres of boot space below the luggage cover, which equates to roughly 40 budget direct socket balls, 40 being my age forevermore. When you drop the back seat, it goes to 1,560 litres, and once these balls are out of the way, we also have a netted luggage pocket over here. We have a flip-down 12-volt outlet here. We have a little takeaway hook on the side here, and we actually have this really quite beautiful tufted carpeting, which is really quite nice. This space being very competitive for a premium medium SUV. I think the normal X3 is 550 or a bit over, so 510 is good, given that there's an electric motor below the floor. Given that the Australian iX3 is so well specified, everything that you see in here is standard. Now, it has these Vanasca leather seats, which are really quite nice. These ones are black with blue stitching, but you can also get them in oyster and mocha with black stitching for no cost option. We have SensorTech, which is vinyl for BMW, across the top of the dash and on the doors, but it means it's padded and it's trimmed. It has blue stitching all the way across and looks really good. In fact, I would suggest that the changes to the iX3, which is just a couple of the sort of finishes. I like this little print that it runs through here in an insert, and the digital instruments, which are controversial in modern BMWs because they're so not easy to read, like their beautiful analog dials of the past, all actually suits the car that the iX3 is much better than it does a normal BMW. Now, I think the only bit of slightly dodgy quality for me in here is this sliding panel here, which doesn't really slide that smoothly and isn't the easiest to open. In fact, sometimes it gets caught unless you just touch that at the top. But it does expose wireless phone charging. We have a USB plug here as well. We have a USB-C port in here in this really nice bin with sort of rubberized bottom and little separate storage receptacles. We have a 16-speaker Harman Kardon stereo as standard, which is excellent and really easy to use. We also have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So again, this lovely expansive 12.3-inch screen just effortlessly comes on when your phone gets connected. Although, if you are charging and you have Apple CarPlay going at the same time, that can heat up the phone quite a bit, so it can sometimes glitch out if the phone's getting too hot. As for the rest of the interior, the seats are pretty good. They're really quite firm, so it does take time to sit in them before you appreciate just how good the support is. The steering wheel is fairly thick, like many modern BMWs, but again, the driving position is pretty good. You can see out pretty well. As for storage, I can easily fit this 1 litre camping bottle in the door, which means a 1.5 litre would be easy. I've got these really big door bins, actual proper door grabs for both front passengers, and just a general level of utility and, for the most part, quality that makes this feel like the SUV premium experience that it should be giving. Now, if I had to criticise one thing in here that is kind of crucial in an electric vehicle, is the regenerative braking. To access that by changing it, it's not via little simple paddles on the steering wheel. It requires you to hit home on the top of the touchscreen here, or home down here alternatively, then car, then settings, then driving mode, then energy recuperation, which is already lit up because I'd had it on there, and we have low, medium, high and adaptive. I just think it's too complex. It should be much easier than that. The last generation X3 and the one before that were all not very good from the B-pillar back, and here we are a lot better than we used to be. But for an electric vehicle, given that the iX3 is based on an X3, we still have a transmission tunnel and we still have not quite perfect rear accommodation. The seat is pretty good, but it is a little bit short. You do feel like you're sitting a bit splay-legged, not really luxurious, it's just supportive. The backrest is a 3-position backrest accessed by a little tab down on the side here that you can lift and pull sort of thing, which is kind of cool. The center armrest here is quite nicely decorated with a little panel here, felt lining in the center here. We've got a pair of cup holders that pop out in the middle there, joining the bottle storage in the door, which only just fits this 1 litre one, unlike the front, which was quite roomy. We do have fairly decent bins here, so this is a good SUV for that sort of stuff. We have netted map pockets in the front. We also have this amazing expanse of panoramic sunroof, which is standard in the iX3 in Australia. In the center here, we have air vents, which sadly aren't on right at the moment because it's really hot, with single zone automatic climate control with its own fan speed, its own temp, and all that sort of stuff. We have a pair of USB-C ports down the bottom here, but we don't have any seat heating as far as I can see, and the trim, well, it's the same as in the front, which is pretty good. I do particularly like the blue ambient lighting that BMW has at night time. This interior does look quite discotheque-ish, and these sort of aluminium panels with X in them for the iX3, even though it's not four-wheel drive. Sitting in the middle of a rear-facing baby seat and the normal baby seat in the iX3, I am not comfortable, as you may be able to tell. I'm okay this side, but the baby capsule with the thing that holds it in if it sort of falls out is not okay. The middle seat is not very good in this car either, and nah. The combined energy consumption claim for the BMW iX3 is 18.5 to 18.9 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometres, and we averaged 18.9 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometres. The WLTP electric distance for this car is up to 460 kilometres. We've got around 360. We haven't done the whole distance, but that is what the car is saying and what our energy consumption says we will be able to achieve. To charge the iX3, the maximum that it can take DC fast charge is 150 kilowatts, and it can go from 10 to 80% charge in 32 minutes. In terms of home charging, you can get a 3-phase 11 kilowatt hour wallbox charger from BMW that takes 7 hours and 30 minutes. The single phase 7.4 kilowatt hour wallbox takes 11 hours and 15 minutes, or if you want to plug it into a normal wall point, it takes 44 hours. The warranty is 3 years or unlimited kilometres in Australia, which is 2 years less than what it should be, especially when Mercedes-Benz is offering 5 years unlimited, and so is Audi. The battery is 8-year warranty. BMW offers 2 service packages for the iX3. One is for 4 years or unlimited kilometres, which costs $1,200 in its most basic form, or $4,605 in the Plus package, or a 6-year unlimited kilometre service package that costs $1,650 in its most basic form, or $5,500 in its Plus package. The Plus package includes things like brake discs and brake pads and the replacement for that stuff, wiper blades, a clutch if you have one, which this car doesn't have, and things like that. So the basic versions are actually good value. Over the last 12 months, the median budget direct customer paid $1,299 to comprehensively insure a BMW X3. However, everybody's situation is different and your premium will vary based on things insurers take into account, like where you live, how you drive your car, and whether you garage your car. The two things that stand out for me the most when driving the iX3 is obviously that it's quiet because it's electric. But it actually is a quiet car in general. Even though it's driving on those 20-inch Bridgestones, it's actually surprisingly subdued for road noise, and there's surprisingly little wind noise. And you could be whizzing along on the freeway, and this is a very calming place to be. Part of the reason for that is that this iX3, even on those 20-inch M Sport alloy wheels, is actually one of the best riding BMW X3s I've ever been in, arguably the best riding, although maybe there was one somewhere there that rode better, but the first one didn't, and the last one didn't, and the normal one doesn't really. So the fact that we're in this car and it's surprisingly comfortable is a huge kudos, in my opinion, to the electric X3. The other part about it is that it isn't necessarily that much of an entertaining car to drive until you really start to challenge its dynamics. The steering is really light. It has 2 settings. You can go into sport or comfort, and in comfort it's probably where it's at its best, but it doesn't feel natural. It's just sort of there, and like a normal X3, there's a fair amount of lock required to turn it into a corner. It doesn't have fast gearing. It is a little bit of a wheel twirler for a power steered car. The Sport one just makes it, I think, too heavy unless you're really hammering it through somewhere like the National Park where we are now. And you can feel that ride as we drive along here. Even though it's really lumpy, it's really not that bad. It's really quite pleasant, surprisingly pleasant. The performance of the iX3 is not exceptional for an electric car. The claim is 6.8 seconds 0 to 100, and it has an electronically limited top speed of 180 kilometers an hour, which I'm sure is plenty, because your range will be terrible if you're doing 180. Now, some of the guys at work said, I didn't really think it was that quick, but I would suggest that it's actually really quite brisk when you need it. You do have 3 modes. You've got Eco Pro and Comfort and Sport, but Comfort is all you really need most of the time. It actually is surprisingly relaxed at lower speeds, but then it does have a little bit of a light switch sort of punch when you need it, which is what an electric car is about. If you keep your foot pinned, certainly from 0 to maybe about 120, which in Australia is really, sadly, all that we need, that's what the iX3 is good at. It is not about sort of breaking your coccyx or slapping your neck, you know, by flattening it like some of the much faster EVs out there. 6.8 is fine. If you can imagine a combustion engine whizzing away in the background, then I reckon everyone would think that's more than fine, but it's plenty. As for the rest of the iX3, I feel like this is actually a really quite competent and complete car. I reckon that it's better than a normal X3. I think it's worth all the extra money because, as I mentioned in the fuel consumption thing, is that we have around 360 kilometres of range. When I was only driving it around town in the instrument pack, I'd done probably close to 80 kilometres and it only used about 30 kilometres of range. So I think if you're driving it well and using the energy recuperation in the brakes, which does work surprisingly smoothly, those settings I mentioned earlier in the car, the 3 settings, and then BMW's own adaptive setting, certainly I just leave it in moderate, which is the middle of the basic 3. The adaptive one sort of uses all the sensors in the car to read the road, to adjust the energy recuperation depending on whether you need it. And so in some instances, the coasting of the iX3 is sensational. It just smoothly slips along. It's 0.29 drag coefficient, working nicely in its favour. But then I don't think that adaptive gives you that sort of energy recuperation braking to make it like a one-pedal car, which is part of the appeal of an electric vehicle, when you need it all the time. Hence why I've put it in moderate, because I think it works nicely. High is a little bit too extreme and it needs a little bit too much of your right foot to apply throttle, and I just feel like that's a little bit tiring. So here we are going through a few corners, and the iX3 is actually a nicely balanced car. I haven't adjusted the ESC Sport or anything like that. I've driven it around with full ESC on, and you can feel that it is a rear-wheel drive car with a battery in the back. The balance is actually really good. It does have a bit more dynamic character than the normal X3, which I just think is a bit of a meh kind of car. I haven't driven the X3M, but I reckon that the iX3 goes a long way to adding some much needed personality to this premium medium BMW SUV. It also has all of the safety tech that you could ever want in a car, but combining with that is the fact that it actually works pretty well. It's got the lane thing on right now. It's aware that there are lanes around me, and it knows that it can keep me in a lane. It does a little bit of a steering vibration. It does a little nudge in, but it isn't really anything excessive. It's actually quite cohesive and really combines with the rest of the car to make it feel unexpectedly complete. I think part of the appeal of the iX3 is that despite the fact that there's a lot of complexity going on underneath this car, that it's a surprisingly simple car to enjoy and to live with. Now, it only can be had in 6 colours in Australia. There's 3 interior trim options. There's 3 interior finish options. There's actually only 2 options on the fact that this is a $115,000 car before on-road costs. But I think that the level of equipment that is in the iX3, the fact that it actually has more driving personality than a normal X3, and that adaptive suspension and those 20-inch wheels do such a good job in making it ride so well, really compounds the appeal of this car. It is quite roomy, it's nicely built, it's rather handsome, and it certainly stands out from the crowd. Only a BMW X3M, I think, could probably offer more driver appeal on the whole, at least in terms of personality, than this car, which makes the iX3 a surprisingly good thing. About the only thing you could really pick on is that it doesn't meet the best in class for charging. A Hyundai Ioniq 5 takes 18 minutes to go from 10 to 80%, and this takes 32. So a little bit longer there, you'll have to eat an extra burger at the shops. But you can add 100 kilometres of range in 10 minutes on a fast charger on this car, and I feel like this is an unchallenging entry to what is soon going to be a very common thing at BMW, and that is an all-electric version of a core model line existing car, and this is a really good start. If you haven't subscribed, please do so below the video, hit the notification bell and leave a comment on what you think on the first ever all-electric regular BMW, the iX3, or on chasing cars. Thanks for watching.